The millionaire invited his maid as a prank, but when she walked in like a queen, all eyes froze. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to the main character. She stands just outside the ballroom doors, listening to laughter bleed through the polished wood like heat through glass. And for a moment she wonders if silence has weight, because it presses against her chest harder than any shout ever could. Her name is Alara Moore, and tonight she has been invited here not as a guest, not as a partner, but as a joke someone else thought would be harmless. The kind of joke powerful men make when boredom feels heavier than guilt. She smooths her hands along the fabric of her dress, a deep midnight blue that hides its age well, chosen carefully, deliberately, not to impress but to belong to herself. Inside the room, crystal chandeliers scatter light across tuxedos and silk gowns. And somewhere near the center of it all stands Adrian Vale, the man who signs her paychecks, the man who never raises his voice, because he has never needed to. He had smiled earlier when he asked her to come. A casual smile, effortless, the kind that assumes compliance. Before the question finishes forming, she remembers how he said it. Come with me tonight, just for fun, as if fun were neutral, as if it never landed unevenly, as if she did not understand exactly what he meant. Alara inhales, counting slowly, 1, 2, 3, the way she learned to do years ago when rooms felt too loud and eyes felt too sharp. She tells herself this is just another space to cross, another doorway, another task, except it isn't, because tonight the air is different, charged. Waiting, the doors begin to open, and a hush ripples outward like a held breath. Conversations thinning, laughter faltering. She steps forward, heels steady against marble, posture calm, spine straight, not defiant, not apologetic, simply present. She does not search for Adrian, does not scan for approval, does not rush. Each step lands with intention, and as she moves, heads turn, one by one. Then all at once, eyes narrowing, widening, freezing, not because she is dazzling in the obvious way, but because she does not shrink, she does not perform gratitude, she does not wear the costume expected of her role. Adrian sees her then, really sees her, and something in his expression fractures, the confident ease slipping just enough to reveal surprise. Underneath, this was not how the joke was supposed to land. Alara reaches the edge of the light and stops, the room suspended between before and after, and in that stillness she realizes something quietly, something irreversible. Whatever happens next, the power in this room has already shifted. It shifts without a sound, without permission, settling into the spaces between glances, and for the first time Alara understands that dignity can be louder than laughter, that presence can undo intention. She lifts her chin a fraction, not in challenge but in acceptance, as if to say she will not explain herself. The crowd remains frozen, unsure how to respond to a woman who refuses the script. And somewhere inside Adrian a question forms, slow and unwelcome. When did the maid stop being invisible? And why does it feel like he is the one exposed? The music does not resume, the room waits, and the night, still young, leans forward. Nothing has been said, yet everything has begun, and the consequences of a careless invitation are about to unfold in ways no one in that glittering room can control, especially the man who believed power could never turn back on him. Morning comes quietly to the Vale estate, not with sunlight but with routine, the soft mechanical rhythm of a house that never truly sleeps. Alara wakes before the alarms, as she always does, the guest wings still dark, the hallways long and echoing. She dresses in the same neutral uniform she has worn for months, pressed, unremarkable, chosen precisely because it erases her. Downstairs the marble floors are cold beneath her shoes. The air smells faintly of citrus cleaner and polished wood. She moves through the kitchen first, setting coffee exactly the way Mr. Vale prefers it, 2 tablespoons of grounds, filtered water, the machine humming to life like a quiet promise that everything will stay in order. This is the world before last night, the world she understands, where every action has a place, and every person knows where they stand. Adrian Vale descends the staircase without greeting, his phone already in his hand, his attention divided between numbers and notifications. He nods once when he passes her, not unkindly, just efficiently, and Alara feels the familiar tightening in her chest ease. This distance is safer, predictable. She wipes down the counter, straightens the chair he pushed back without noticing, and listens to the clock tick toward 8. Her day unfolds in segments. Laundry sorted by fabric and color, windows cleaned from left to right, the study dusted carefully around framed awards and glass trophies that catch the light like frozen applause. She has memorized this house through repetition, every creak, every blind spot, every room where voices carry. She knows when to disappear and when to remain still. Invisibility has its own discipline, and she has mastered it. Yet fragments of last night intrude without warning. The weight of the dress on her shoulders, the way the room fell silent, the look on Adrian's face when he finally saw her. She presses her fingers into the folded towels, grounding herself, reminding herself that nothing has changed. This was always the rule. Moments pass. People forget. Power resets itself by morning. At noon, Adrian's assistant calls to confirm a meeting. Alara brings lunch into the study and places it on the desk without comment. He thanks her absently, eyes never lifting. And for a moment she feels foolish for expecting anything else, foolish for thinking a single evening could bend a life built on control. But as she turns to leave, she senses it, the pause, the smallest hesitation. Adrian looks up then, just briefly. His gaze lingers as if searching for a familiar outline that no longer fits. Their eyes meet, and Alara feels it again, that subtle shift, like the floor moving an inch beneath her feet. He says nothing. She says nothing. The silence stretches and then snaps back into place. The afternoon passes, yet the house feels altered, as if the walls themselves remember. In the mirror of the service hallway she catches her reflection, the uniform plain, her hair tied back. And yet something is different. She stands straighter, her expression calmer. The evening approaches, shadows lengthening across the floors, and Adrian prepares to leave for another engagement. He pauses near the door, keys in hand, and without turning says her name, Alara, the sound of it unexpected, unfamiliar on his tongue. Yes, sir, she answers automatically, then stops, correcting herself. Yes, Mr. Vale. He hesitates again, then nods, as if deciding against something he cannot quite name. After he leaves, the house exhales. Alara steps outside into the garden, the air cool against her skin. She allows herself one slow breath, the kind she never takes indoors. She does not know what last night will mean, only that it cannot be undone. The routine continues, but beneath it something waits, patient, watching, and as the lights come on one by one across the estate, Alara senses that the quiet order she has lived within is beginning to fracture, and whatever follows will demand more than silence. Power has a way of announcing itself without raising its voice, and in Adrian Vale's world it lives in the pauses between words, the way doors open before he reaches them, the way people adjust their posture when he enters a room. Alara has learned this language instinctively. She recognizes authority not by volume, but by expectation, and over the next few days she begins to feel it pressing closer, more attentive, as if the house itself has noticed her. Adrian returns earlier than usual one afternoon, his meetings cut short, his mood unreadable. He calls for her from the hallway, not sharply, just once, and she responds immediately, appearing at his side with the quiet efficiency he prefers. I need you to reorganize the guest wing, he says, his tone casual, but his eyes study her face as if searching for a reaction. Of course, she answers, and waits. He does not dismiss her right away. Instead he adds, there will be an event here next week, some investors, press, you will need to be available. The words land heavier than they should, not because of the work, but because of the implication. She nods. Availability is expected, explanation is not. Later she overhears a call drifting from his office, his voice low, controlled. He jokes about appearances, about knowing how to manage perception, about keeping things where they belong. She does not know why the words sting, only that they do. That night, as she folds linens in the quiet laundry room, she notices a subtle change. The staff speaks to her differently, softer, with curiosity edged beneath politeness. Someone mentions the gala. Someone else mentions how striking she looked. Alara says nothing. She does not confirm or deny. She has learned that attention invites questions, and questions invite costs. The next morning Adrian asks her to bring documents to the study. When she enters, he gestures for her to stay. He asks about her schedule, about whether she has family nearby. The questions are framed as practical, but they linger too long. She answers carefully, briefly, her past held behind a practiced neutrality. He nods, absorbing, then says, "You handled yourself well the other night." It was meant lightly, almost generously, yet something in his phrasing tightens the space between them. Handled, as if she were an element to be managed, not a person who chose. She thanks him because it is easier than correcting him, because correcting him would mean crossing a line he has not acknowledged exists. Days pass, and the imbalance sharpens. Adrian begins to notice her presence in ways that feel less accidental. He pauses when she enters rooms. His gaze follows her longer than necessary. Once, during a meeting at the estate, he introduces her simply as Alara. No title, no explanation, and the guests glance at her with interest, confusion, something unspoken shifts. After they leave, he asks her opinion on the conversation. Her opinion, the word, surprises her. She answers honestly but softly, offering an observation about tone, about leverage. He listens, truly listens, then thanks her, and she realizes this is the danger, not the prank, not the attention, but the slow erosion of distance. Power does not always dominate by force. Sometimes it invites, sometimes it tests how much access it can take without asking permission. Alara feels the pull of it, the temptation to step closer, to be seen not as staff, but as someone whose insight matters. Yet she also feels the cost rising, the unspoken expectation that gratitude will follow opportunity, that proximity will require silence. One evening, as they review plans for the upcoming event, Adrian says, "You will attend again." He says it as a statement, not a request. The room stills. She looks at him, and for the first time she does not answer right away. The pause stretches, thin but deliberate. "I will consider it," she says finally. His eyebrows lift almost imperceptibly. No one has ever told him that before, not in this house, not in this tone. The silence that follows is charged, not hostile, but unsettled. He nods once, as if acknowledging a move he did not anticipate. Later, alone in her room, Alara sits on the edge of the bed, the weight of the moment pressing in. She understands now that the imbalance is not just about wealth or position. It is about who is allowed to choose and who is expected to comply. And for the first time since she arrived at the Vale estate, she feels the line between those roles beginning to blur, not because Adrian has relinquished power, but because she has begun to claim something he cannot easily take back. The house remains quiet, ordered, immaculate, but beneath its polished surface, a question has been asked, and neither of them knows yet what the answer will demand. The invitation becomes real the following evening, delivered not with ceremony, but with a sentence spoken in passing, as if it carries no weight at all. Adrian finds Alara in the hallway outside the study, clipboard in her hands, eyes lowered in habit. "We are attending the Hawthorne benefit tomorrow night," he says, adjusting his cufflinks without looking at her. "I want you there." She lifts her gaze slowly, measuring the words. There is no mention of preparation, no offer of assistance, no acknowledgement of the unspoken rules that govern such events. Just the expectation, "Yes, Mr. Vale," she replies, though something in her tone has shifted, not defiant, simply aware. The next day unfolds with unusual quiet, the house buzzing with staff preparing for guests, florists moving through the rooms, caterers setting schedules. Alara completes her tasks with practiced efficiency, yet she notices what is missing. No garment bags arrive for her. No stylist calls her name. No assistant pulls her aside with instructions. By late afternoon, the absence becomes unmistakable. She approaches the house manager carefully, asking whether there has been a mistake. The woman hesitates, glancing toward the study door before answering. Mr. Vale did not request anything additional. The words confirm what Alara already understands. This is intentional. The prank has not ended. It has merely evolved. By 6 o'clock the guests begin to arrive, luxury cars lining the drive, voices drifting through open windows, laughter sharp and confident. Alara stands in her room. The uniform folded neatly on the bed. Untouched, she opens the small suitcase beneath the dresser, the one she has never unpacked. Inside rests a single dress wrapped in tissue, a relic from a life she rarely allows herself to remember. She hesitates, not because of fear, but because she knows the cost of stepping outside the role assigned to her. Downstairs, Adrian scans the entry hall, greeting investors, accepting compliments. Everything is proceeding exactly as planned, except for a flicker of anticipation he does not quite understand. When Alara finally descends the staircase, there is no announcement, no signal, just the soft sound of her heels against stone. Conversations falter as heads turn. The effect is immediate and unmistakable. Adrian turns instinctively, ready to witness the punchline he expects, and instead feels the ground shift beneath him. Alara is not dressed for spectacle. There is no excess, no attempt to compete with wealth. Her presence is composed, deliberate, the dress simple yet commanding. Her hair styled with care, she has given herself. She meets the room with calm acceptance, not seeking permission, not asking to be seen. The silence spreads, uncomfortable, electric. This was not the reaction Adrian anticipated. He intended amusement, mild embarrassment at most, a private joke at her expense that would dissolve into laughter. Instead, he finds himself exposed, watching as guests reassess, curiosity replacing dismissal. Someone steps forward to greet her, assuming status by confidence alone. Adrian remains still, realizing too late that he has lost control of the narrative. This is the moment the prank reveals its cruelty, not in what was done, but in what it assumed, that Alara would comply, that she would arrive diminished, that she would accept the joke without resistance. She does none of these things. Throughout the evening, Adrian watches from a distance, each interaction deepening his unease. She speaks softly, listens attentively, never once explaining herself. He senses the shift in attention, the subtle recalibration of power, and for the first time he understands the danger of underestimating someone who has nothing to prove. As the night progresses, he approaches her, offering a compliment framed as reassurance. "You look very nice," he says, intending kindness, yet the words land hollow. She meets his gaze steadily. "Thank you for the invitation," she replies, her tone neutral, leaving the rest unsaid. There is no accusation, no gratitude, only acknowledgement. The space between them thickens. Later, when the guests depart and the house grows quiet again, Adrian stands alone in the empty hall, replaying the evening, realizing that the prank has succeeded in a way he never intended. It has revealed something essential, not about Alara, but about himself. And as the lights dim and the staff disperses, he understands that what began as a joke has become a test he did not know he was taking, and may already have failed. In the days that follow the Hawthorne benefit, the house settles into a quieter rhythm, as if trying to forget what it witnessed, yet nothing truly returns to the way it was. Alara resumes her duties without announcement, without explanation, moving through the estate with the same measured grace. But something subtle has changed in how the space responds to her. Doors are held a second longer. Conversations pause when she enters. Eyes follow, and then look away. Adrian notices these shifts even when he pretends not to. He finds himself listening for her footsteps, registering her presence before he sees her. The silence between them stretches, not awkward, but charged. During breakfast service, he watches her hands as she pours coffee, steady, unhurried. The same hands that held a room captive days earlier. He remembers the laughter that never came, the way the joke collapsed under the weight of its own assumptions. And he feels an unfamiliar discomfort, not guilt exactly, but curiosity edged with regret. He begins to ask her small questions, neutral ones, about scheduling, about preferences for the next event, his tone careful, testing. She answers politely, offering what is required and nothing more, maintaining a distance that now feels intentional rather than imposed. One afternoon, he asks her to walk the grounds with him to review preparations for future guests. The request framed as practical, she agrees, and they move side by side through the garden paths. The air warm, the hedges trimmed into precision. He speaks about logistics. She listens, occasionally offering an observation that reveals an understanding he had not expected. He finds himself slowing his pace to match hers, noticing how she navigates the space as if it belongs to her too. Later, inside the study, he asks her opinion again, and this time she pauses before answering. Choosing her words with care, her insight is sharp, quietly perceptive. He thanks her, sincerely, and the word feels heavier than before. As evening approaches, Adrian hosts a small dinner for colleagues, unplanned, informal. He asks Alara to remain nearby, not as staff exactly, but as presence. She stands at the edge of the room, engaged but not intrusive, and he becomes acutely aware of how others respond to her, the way their attention shifts, the way conversations bend toward her without effort. Something tightens in his chest, not ownership, but something more unsettling, the realization that she does not belong to him in any way he understands. Later that night, after the guests leave, he finds her in the kitchen, rinsing glasses. He thanks her again, then hesitates, as if searching for a way to bridge the gap he created. She meets his gaze calmly. Waiting, he almost apologizes, but the word does not come. Instead he says, "I did not expect what happened." She nods once, neither forgiving nor condemning. Expectation is often the problem. She replies softly, then returns to her task, leaving him standing alone. The days continue, marked by small moments that accumulate meaning. A shared glance, a conversation cut short, an unspoken boundary respected. Alara feels the slow burn of change, not dramatic, not rushed, but indicating a future she cannot yet name. She notices how Adrian listens differently now, how his authority softens without weakening, how he seems to measure his words before speaking to her. Yet she also senses the tension growing, the questions he has not asked, the apology he has not given. One evening, as she prepares to leave the kitchen, Adrian stops her. He says her name again, this time without title, the sound deliberate. She turns, attentive. There is a moment where something could be said, something that would alter the course of everything. But instead he asks if she will attend another event with him, not as a prank, not as an experiment, but as a choice. She studies him, the power gap still present, still real, yet no longer absolute. "I will think about it," she says, mirroring her earlier words, and the symmetry is not lost on either of them. As she walks away, Adrian realizes that the slow burn is no longer contained. It is moving towards something inevitable, something neither of them can fully control, and the quiet that follows is filled with anticipation, not resolution, the promise of a turning point still ahead. The turning point arrives quietly, without spectacle, on a night that looks ordinary from the outside. Rain tapping against the tall windows, the estate wrapped in a hush that feels deliberate. Adrian and Alara find themselves alone in the study after dinner, papers spread across the desk, the remnants of a conversation that has drifted far from its original purpose. He had asked her to stay to review plans for an upcoming charity board meeting, another public setting, another moment where her presence would matter. She sits across from him, posture composed, hands folded loosely, listening as he speaks about strategy, about optics, about influence, and suddenly the words feel thin even to him. He stops mid-sentence, the silence settling between them. Alara looks up, attentive, waiting, and something in her patience disarms him. This is not the silence of submission, but the silence of choice. He exhales slowly, sets the papers aside, and for the first time he speaks without framing, without calculation. "I owe you something," he says, his voice lower than usual. She does not respond immediately, giving the words space to exist on their own. "You invited me as a joke," she says finally, not accusing, simply naming the truth. "Yes," he answers, the admission stark in the quiet room, "and I let it go on longer than it should have." The rain grows heavier, filling the pause. He looks at her then, not as staff, not as spectacle, but as a woman who stood in front of a room and did not bend. "I did not realize how careless I was with your dignity," he says, and the word dignity hangs between them, fragile, powerful. Alara feels the weight of the moment press against her ribs, the past flickering behind her eyes, rooms where laughter was sharper, power less restrained. She keeps her voice steady. "Careless assumes you did not know better," she says, gently. "You did, you just did not think it would matter." The truth lands, not as a blow, but as a mirror. Adrian nods, accepting it. "I am sorry," he says, fully this time, No qualifiers, no defenses, the apology is not loud. But it is complete. Alara absorbs it, feeling neither triumph nor relief, only a quiet settling. Thank you for saying it, she replies. The room seems to breathe with them. A boundary crossed, not erased, but acknowledged. He hesitates, then adds, I would like to know you. Not as part of my house, not as a role I assigned, but as yourself. The request is careful, almost tentative. She studies him, measuring intent against action, knowing how easily words can soften without changing structure, knowing also that this moment cannot be undone, knowing that if she accepts, the dynamic will shift. Again, perhaps dangerously, she does not answer right away. Instead, she stands, moving to the window, watching the rain trace lines down the glass. You see me now, she says quietly. That does not mean the world will. He joins her at a respectful distance. I cannot change the world overnight, he replies, but I can change how I move through it, how I treat the people who stand in front of me. She turns back to him, meeting his gaze. And in that look there is no submission, no challenge, only clarity. Then we will take this slowly, she says, on equal footing. He nods, relief and uncertainty mingling. Agreed. The conversation does not end with a promise of romance. There is no touch, no dramatic declaration. Instead, there is something more precarious. Mutual recognition. As Alara leaves the study, returning to the quiet of her room, she feels the shift inside herself. The knowledge that she has been heard without having to raise her voice. Adrian remains by the window long after she is gone, watching the rain, understanding that this is the point of no return. The prank that began as amusement has transformed into a reckoning, and the path ahead will require restraint, humility, and courage he has rarely needed before. Neither of them knows where this will lead, only that the balance has changed, and whatever comes next will demand more honesty than either of them has ever offered willingly. The fragile balance they have begun to build does not last long, because power, once unsettled, rarely retreats without resistance. The board charity gala arrives faster than expected, larger than planned, a convergence of donors, executives, and press that transforms the city hotel into a stage where perception matters more than truth. Adrian insists Alara attend, not as staff, not as spectacle, but publicly at his side. The decision is intentional, almost defiant. Yet as the evening unfolds, he begins to understand how little control he truly has. The moment they enter the ballroom together, whispers ripple outward, familiar faces registering surprise, curiosity sharpening into speculation. Alara feels it immediately, the weight of attention heavier than before, because this time the stakes are personal. She moves with calm precision, her posture steady, her expression unreadable. Adrian introduces her without explanation, simply by name, and the absence of labels unsettles people more than any revelation could. During the cocktail hour, a man approaches them, confident, well-dressed, someone Adrian knows from past deals. His gaze lingers on Alara with open interest. He addresses her directly, asking about her background, her work, her perspective on the Foundation's mission. Alara answers thoughtfully, articulately, and the man listens, genuinely engaged. Adrian watches from inches away as the conversation deepens, something tightening in his chest, a sensation he does not recognize at first. Not anger, not fear, but something sharper, possessive and unwelcome. He tells himself it is professional concern, that optics matter, that misinterpretation could follow. Yet when the man laughs at something Alara says, leaning closer, Adrian steps in without thinking, interrupting, redirecting the conversation with forced ease. Alara notices the shift instantly, the tension beneath his smile. Later, during dinner, seating arrangements place Alara beside the same man, Adrian across the table. The separation feels deliberate, orchestrated by hands unseen, and throughout the meal Adrian becomes acutely aware of every glance exchanged, every moment of shared attention that excludes him. He listens to the speeches with half an ear, his focus drawn again and again to Alara, to the way she navigates the space effortlessly, belonging without permission. When the music begins and guests move to the dance floor, the man stands and offers Alara his hand. She hesitates, glancing briefly toward Adrian, not seeking approval, simply acknowledging presence. Then she accepts, rising gracefully. Adrian remains seated, his jaw tightening as he watches them disappear into the crowd. The realization hits him with uncomfortable clarity. This is what he risked, not losing control of an evening, but losing her autonomy entirely. Realizing she was never his to manage, on the dance floor Alara moves with quiet confidence, aware of Adrian's gaze yet refusing to let it dictate her choices. The music swells, the room alive with movement, and for a moment she feels the freedom of it, the release of expectation. When the song ends, Adrian is there, waiting, his expression carefully neutral. "May I have a word?" he asks, his tone polite but firm. She excuses herself and follows him to a quieter corridor, away from the noise, the air between them charged. "You seemed uncomfortable," she says, breaking the silence. He exhales, choosing honesty over control. "I was," he admits, the word surprising them both. "Why?" she asks softly. He struggles for a moment, then answers, "Because I realized how little right I have to feel that way. And yet I do." The confession is raw, imperfect. Alara absorbs it, recognizing the vulnerability beneath the tension. This is what happens when you invite someone into your world without preparing to let go. She replies, not unkindly. He nods, understanding the truth in her words. But the moment is interrupted by voices approaching. The corridor filling again, the private giving way to public. They return to the room, the evening continuing as if nothing has shifted. Yet everything has. Rumors begin to circulate, questions forming, motives assigned. Adrian senses the narrative slipping beyond his grasp, and for the first time he understands that wanting her is not the same as deserving her trust. Alara feels it too, the strain between what they have acknowledged and what the world will demand next. As the night draws to a close, they leave together but not touching, the silence between them heavy with unspoken decisions, both aware that the conflict has escalated beyond misunderstanding into a test that will require sacrifice, clarity, and a choice neither of them can postpone much longer. And as the car pulls away from the glowing hotel entrance, Alara looks out at the city lights, knowing that the next step will either redefine their connection or end it entirely. The climax does not arrive with shouting or spectacle, but with a choice made in near silence, the kind that alters lives precisely because it is not witnessed. The morning after the gala dawns gray and still, the city muted by low clouds. Adrian wakes early, the weight of the previous night pressing against his thoughts, rumors already forming beyond his control, messages lighting his phone with questions he does not answer. Downstairs the house feels different, expectant, as if waiting for a decision. Alara is in the kitchen, finishing preparations before the rest of the staff arrives, her movements calm, deliberate. She senses him before he speaks. He clears his throat, hesitates, then says her name. She turns, meeting his gaze without surprise. They stand there for a moment, the space between them filled with everything unsaid. "I need to talk to you," he says, not as a command, but as a request. She nods once, setting aside what she is holding. They move into the study, the same room where apologies were offered, where boundaries were named. The rain begins again outside, light but persistent. Adrian does not sit. Instead, he stands by the desk, hands resting on the wood, grounding himself. "Last night made something clear to me," he begins. "I cannot ask you to exist in my world without consequences, without exposing you to things you did not consent to." She listens, expression neutral. "And I cannot pretend that my feelings, whatever they are becoming, do not complicate everything." He pauses, then continues. "I am prepared to step back, to make a public statement, to clarify that you are not tied to me in any professional or personal way, that you owe me nothing." The words cost him. He feels it, the relinquishing of control, the surrender of narrative. Alara studies him carefully, hearing not only what he offers, but what he risks. "You would do that?" she asks softly. Knowing the implications, he nods, immediately, without qualification. "Yes." She turns away, moving toward the window, watching the rain blur the garden beyond. This is the quiet climax, not a declaration of love, but an act of release. She understands the significance of it, the way power shifts when it is voluntarily loosened. She faces him again, her voice steady. "If you do this," she says, "you must do it completely. No half measures, no quiet corrections later. He meets her gaze, resolute. I understand, she breathes out slowly, feeling the tension in her chest ease just enough to think clearly. Then this is what I need, she says. I need to leave this house. Not in anger, not in secrecy, but openly, on my terms. I need space to decide who I am without your shadow. The words land heavily. Adrian feels the loss immediately, the absence already forming. But he does not protest. He nods, accepting the cost. I will make arrangements, he says. She shakes her head gently. No. I will. This too must be my choice. A faint smile touches his lips, not of relief, but of respect. Of course, the rest of the day unfolds quietly. Adrian makes the calls he promised. His statement measured, clear, reframing the narrative before it can harden. Alara packs her belongings. The small suitcase no longer hidden. Staff members notice. Whispers follow, but no one stops her. No one questions her right to leave. As evening falls, she stands at the front door, ready to step out of the life she has inhabited. Adrian meets her there, not touching, not blocking her path. Thank you, he says, for holding me accountable. She nods. And thank you, she replies, for listening when it mattered. The door closes behind her with a soft finality, not a slam, not a whisper. Adrian remains inside, alone. The house suddenly vast and empty. Alara steps into the cool air, the city waiting, uncertain but open. She does not look back, because this ending is not about loss. It is about agency, about choosing oneself when the temptation to stay is strongest. And as she disappears down the drive, both understand that what has been built cannot be undone, only transformed. The question now is not whether they will find each other again, but who they will be if they do. Time moves differently once she leaves the Vale estate, slower, quieter, marked by choices that belong only to Alara now. She takes a small apartment across town, modest but filled with light, the windows overlooking a street that hums with ordinary life. Mornings begin with her own routine. Coffee brewed the way she prefers it, silence chosen rather than imposed. She finds work quickly, not because of connections, but because confidence has replaced hesitation in her voice. She walks into interviews without shrinking, without explaining herself, and people respond. Weeks pass, and the city forgets its brief fascination. Rumors dissolve into newer stories, yet the impact remains. Adrian feels it daily, the house emptier than before, not because of her absence alone, but because of what she awakened and then took with her. He restructures the foundation publicly, placing emphasis on dignity, on accountability, words that now carry personal weight. When asked about the changes, he speaks carefully, giving credit to a lesson learned rather than a person claimed. He does not reach out to her, respecting the boundaries she drew, understanding that growth requires restraint as much as action. Alara hears about him indirectly, through articles, through quiet comments from acquaintances. She reads without reaction, recognizing the difference between transformation performed and transformation lived. One evening, months later, she attends a small art exhibition downtown, a community event, unpretentious, the kind of place she once would have passed unnoticed. She stands before a painting, absorbed. When she senses someone beside her, she turns and finds Adrian there, not announced, not commanding attention, simply present. Their eyes meet, surprise flickering briefly before settling into something calmer. I did not know you liked this artist, she says. He smiles faintly. I am learning what I like. The exchange is easy, unforced. They walk through the gallery together, speaking about the work, about color and intention, about how meaning shifts depending on who is looking. There is no mention of the past, no need to revisit what has already reshaped them. At the end of the evening, outside beneath soft streetlights, Adrian pauses. I am glad you found your footing, he says, sincerely. She nods. I am glad you let go when it mattered. They stand there for a moment, neither rushing forward nor pulling away, the possibility of something new present but undefined. This is not a reunion promised, but an understanding earned. They part without expectation, carrying with them a respect that did not exist before. As Alara walks home, she reflects on how a prank meant to diminish her revealed something far more important, that dignity does not need permission, That power loses its grip when confronted with self-possession. Adrian returns to his car, aware that success without humility is hollow. That true authority begins where control ends. The story does not conclude with a declaration of love, because real change rarely does. Instead, it ends with alignment. Two lives altered by a moment of clarity, moving forward separately yet irrevocably changed. And perhaps that is the quiet truth this story leaves behind. That respect is the foundation of any connection worth keeping. That choosing oneself is not an ending, but an opening. And that sometimes the most powerful response to being underestimated is simply to stand fully as who you are. If this story resonated with you, if it reminded you of a moment when you claimed your own worth or witnessed someone else do the same, consider supporting the channel by liking this video, subscribing for more stories like this, and sharing it with someone who might need the reminder. Your support allows us to continue bringing thoughtful, emotionally rich stories to life, and we are grateful to have you here.